I would like to introduce now our next speaker, Dr. Salih Yucel. The title of his presentation is An Islamic Therapy, Fear-Reducing Holistic Approach. Salih Yucel got a Bachelor of Islamic Divinity from University of Ankara and a Master's of Theology from the University of Sydney. He is a Muslim chaplain in Australia and then at Brigham and Women's Hospital, which is affiliated health institutions of Harvard Medical School, for 13 years. He completed his doctorate at Boston University in 2007. His doctoral research was about the effect of prayer on Muslim patients' well-being. Currently, he teaches at Center for Islamic Studies and Civilization at Charles Sturt University. He is also a part-time lecturer at ACU. He is the author of 4 books, co-author of 1 book, and number of articles and book chapters. Dr. Yucel, the floor is yours. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace be upon you all. Greetings from Melbourne, by the way. Here is Sunday morning and we are enjoying a spring break. Also, it's a tradition to begin to say that I pay my respect to past and present elders of the indigenous community in Australia. So in my presentation, first of all, I will examine Ibn Sina's body, mind, and soul connections in regarding identifying the fear and then how to reduce it. And second, I will also analyze Said Nursi's, which is a contemporary scholar, spiritually injected rational approach to the mental illness in regarding reducing the fear. So in my chaplaincy work in last almost 30 years in Australia and America, I combine these 2 methods, which I call FERHA, Fear Reducing Holistic Approach, at my work voluntarily. So fear is one of the strongest human emotion that is vital for survival. It's also the most weakness of human being. Fear is triggered sometimes, particularly to the schizophrenic patients by clergies and caregivers with inappropriate approaches. As it is known, praying for healing of mentally ill patients in the Muslim societies, including those who are assumed to be possessed by jinns, has existed since the beginning of Islam. In the contemporary Muslim world, instead of being viewed as a psychological or physical illness, many Muslims attribute mental illness to the metaphysical forces as well. So treatments for mental illness in the Muslim world can be classified into 3 groups. The first group view it as a psychological or physical illness and disbelieve or disregard that the cause is metaphysical forces. Therefore, they use medication and modern therapy only. The second group accept the role of metaphysical forces in illness and use medication and therapy alongside prayer. The third group sees the metaphysical forces as the cause of illness and use only prayer for healing. Each treatment has strengths and weaknesses. The first group is out of scope of this presentation. It is generally accepted that extreme, unrealistic fear and disorders of negative imagination, which is called wahm in Arabic, are considered symptoms of jinns possession by the second and third groups. Wahm causes harm to the human psyche and is considered as a schizophrenic disorder in psychology. This paper argues that religion can play an important role in reducing the level of fear if it is used or practiced appropriately. It could be otherwise when religion is misunderstood or misused. Throughout my chaplaincy work over the last 3 decades in Australia and in the US, I combined Ibn Sina's treatment of recognizing fear and Syed Nursi's methodology in reducing fear and anxiety for the treatment of the wahm. And so I call this fear-reducing holistic approach FERHA. FERHA empowers the client to discover and use their unused strength. That's the aim, to discover and use their unused strength. Because as it was mentioned during the previous presentation, that Allah created in human nature sufficient power to overcome, to face the challenges. And that would include also to face against extreme, unrealistic fear and disorder of negative imagination. So Nursi argues that human being emotionally gets weak due to scattering the power of the patience to the past and the future and live less for the present. So God provides sufficient power of patience to every human being. However, by thinking too much about past what happened and too much about future still did not happen, then has less for present. And that makes human being weak in regarding facing the challenges. So FERHA methodology, as I said, that it's a spiritual injected rational approach. It has 4 stages. Number 1, build trust with the client. Second, reduce fear and negative feeling through engagement. Third, recognize the negative imagination, wahm, in depth. And the fourth, discover unused strength for therapy. So the aim of therapy is to activate emotional and smart brain by reducing and managing fear and anxiety. So this will generate new neural connections in the prefrontal cortex, because human brain has survival brain and also what we call smart brain, and between two there's emotional brain. When smart brain is disactivated, then emotional brain and survival brain activates. That happens during the fear, depression, anxiety, and so on. So Ibn Sina's approach is a bit secular compared with the religious studies. He recognized the value of overcoming fears and the use of willpower in the therapy of the mentally ill people. He wrote about the mind and its existence, the mind-body relations, sensation, and perception in his book, which is called Kitab al-Shifa. He discusses, that's the important point, the relationship between 5 external senses, which he calls hawas zahira, namely hearing, sight, smell, taste, touch, and 5 internal senses, hawas batina, which is called. They are the common sense, retentive imagination, compositive, estimation and memory, and recollection, which perceive goodness or evil, positive or negative, and then forms them in the memory. So according to Ibn Sina, the common sense combines whatever is received from the 5 external senses. Then it forms it, and retentive imagination stores these forms. The compositive sense combines the form in the imagination faculty. And the last one, estimation sense, judges salient or of interest. The memory and recollection sense reflects these unrealistic reckonings. So to overcome such fears, he considers it is necessary to connect the body, mind, and soul via external and internal senses. So he focuses on the link between estimation, incidental perception, estimation status as judgmental faculty. According to him, the human faculty of imagination is like a mirror upon which a succession of ideas reflects from the active intellect. So some sensitive people misuse their mind with an excessive concentration on unrealistic, imaginative fear. Particularly that happens, among the smart people. First, a person has a negative thought, then establishes it by an excessive focusing on it. Gradually, it is shaped and even further in the faculty of imagination. Subsequently, the negative, unrealistic imagination is actualized and moves into the mind and transformed to the wahm, estimation. It can reach the point where it forms or influences the basis of one's character and even daily life. For unrealistic fear, Ibn Sina gives an example. He illustrates fear by saying that is a plank of wood, if it is put across a street and ask someone, to walk on it, he or she will be able to walk easily. But if the same plank of wood is placed across a gorge, and the same person will not probably be able to walk on it and may well fall if he or she tries. Why? It's because of the fear. It's the same, plank of wood. One of them is on the ground in the streets, easily everyone can walk on it. But when you put between the two, between a gorge, then because of that fear, the people will not walk on it and will be hesitant. So Ibn Sina argues that the religious belief can play an important role in overcoming fears. He supports the view of the benefits of the religion in overcoming particularly the extreme fear. He holds that religion can strengthen willpower because a person puts their unwavering faith in a supreme power, we call Allah, who is in control of everything. Such belief leaves less room in human minds for fear of other beings and things. In contrary, Imam Ghazali connects 5 external senses to the heart. For him, as much as these 5 external senses are used for the right purpose, human being can attain happiness and satisfaction. So for Said Nursi, fear and imagination are part of human nature. Nursi divides fear into 3 types. The first one is tatlı fear, which means sweet fear. It is incorporated in human nature to preserve life. The second type is wahm, imaginary fear. And lastly, external fear. For Nursi, humans were created with the capacity of imagination in order to recognize threats and move to protect and preserve life, not to ruin and destroy the life. So for him, for Nursi, the main cause of unrealistic fear is misusing imagination as an actual object. Nursi views the imagination faculty like Ibn Sina, like as a mirror. So that can reflect anything. If you turn your mirror to a flower, it will reflect flower. If you turn your mirror to a dirt, it will reflect the dirt. And he argues that just as a reflection of a dirty thing on a mirror is not real and does not make the mirror unclean, similarly, a reflection of a scary thing on the faculty of imagination is not real and not to be feared. So whatever is coming to our mind because of that fear. So imagination used actively in a daily human life. The reason is it helps productivity, problem solving, and further innovation. For example, if you would like to go to the city, first you will imagine, how can I get there? In which way, which road or freeway I should use? So it's a fundamental to integrating experience and learning. Without imagination power, we will not be able to do this. However, some people are more sensitive to certain fears and the power of imagination. They are more likely to misuse it, and sometimes because they consciously or subconsciously give more value to it. Nursi argues that the combination of fear and imagination can cause the sickness of scruples, which leads to schizophrenic disorder. Nursi states that the most effective medicine for unrealistic fear or wahm is to give it no importance. The more importance is given it, the more it grows and swells. If no importance is given it, it lessens and disperses. He gives the example of bees. The more the bees are upset, the more they swarm around a person's head. If no attention is paid to them, they disperse. So FERHA has 4 stages, 4 steps. The first one is building trust. The first step of FERHA therapy is the hardest one, and it takes time. Building trust is necessary in spiritual care. I think all of the audience will agree with me. The majority of related research also shows that trustworthiness is an indispensable attribute for a therapist, as Ackerman and many other researchers argue. Step 2, reducing fear and negative feeling through engagement. So spiritual caregiver should avoid creating the fear. In contrary, they should help to the client to reduce the fear. Then how? For Ibn Sina and Nursi, keeping these 5 senses busy with good things. So guiding clients through questioning to look at or observe everything with which Nursi calls ziyadar nazar, or enlightened or positive outlook. Sometimes he called nabawi, the prophetic outlook as well. So how that could happen? That can happen through the connection between human being and the nature via the names of Allah. If we see something is beautiful, then we should remember that beauty reflects the beauty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So then he says that it means to cite all creations as the art of Allah and try to see or understand the essential or relative beauty behind everything or every event. And the second, this is for sighting, by the way, for 5 senses. The second is, taste. So tasting or consuming lawful food and drinks and see it as like a medicine that's created by God. And the third one, touching. One of 5 senses. Hands should be busy with prayer beads, doing gardening, doing homework, doing other volunteer work. So as much as we keep client busy with such things, we'll be able to have a positive perception and we'll leave a positive mark in the mind. Listening lawful music to lawful music, which we had a beautiful one about an hour ago, and smelling natural perfume. This is also very important in regard to 5 senses. So then whatever is perceived through these 5 external senses will impact the 5 internal senses, and this will activate the smart brain. When the smart brain is activated, it will generate new neural connection and will help for wellness. So step 3, recognizing the negative imagination. Ibn Sina and Nursi approaches are to note in depth the nature of the client's extreme unrealistic fear and disorders of negative imagination. They are formed or shaped through imagination by sensitive people and transformed to the reality which is actually does not exist. So step 4, discovering unused and misused strength, which this is very important. It's well known that in Islamic theological framework that Allah burdens no soul except with its capacity, as it's mentioned in Quran chapter 2 verse 286. I examined more than 40 major Quranic tafsirs, and there's a unanimous agreement or ijma from Muslim scholars on this issue that Allah created sufficient power of patience to face calamities and difficulties or to manage it. However, because we are not aware of this unused skill or potential skill, then we fail. So in regard to COVID-19, as it's known that it's creating anxiety, fear, depression in the societies, particularly among the elders, I think that holistic approach can contribute to reducing fear, anxiety, and depression, by using these 5 external senses according to Ibn Sina and Said Nursi's formula. So if I conclude my presentation, there is a significant literature that indicates religion and spirituality play important roles for well-being and satisfaction in societies if religion is used properly. Ibn Sina and Said Nursi's approaches to mentally ill people can contribute to the holistic therapy. A combination of their approaches in FERHA therapy creates an alternative and safe space for the client. Instead of saying do or don't, it's about actively listening to the client and guiding him or her through questions. First, it is necessary to establish trust with the client. Second, through engagement, the client can reduce fear and anxiety. Third, during the therapy, the client can recognize the involuntary negative imagination. Finally, one can empower the client by discovering their unused or misused strength instead of, preaching. So because as a human being, we are connected to the both spiritual and corporal worlds, and we are traveler between these two, consciously or unconsciously. So keeping the client busy with the prayer, good deeds, volunteer work, the music of soul, helping family, reading, using attar of roses, and other healthy activities can have a positive impact on internal 5 senses, which can lead them to think less about negative things and can contribute promoting recovery. Thank you so much.